Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Soothkeep live stream. I did figure a lot of things out on how to use my Streamlabs desktop live streaming software. Please, if you can see me and hear me, give me a good thumbs up. Give me a shout out there in the chat. Just make sure that this is actually on right now. So, hopefully you folks can hear me and see me. Okay, yes, people hear me and see me, so fantastic. We are off to a great start. So how's the volume? Is the volume actually working pretty good, or do I need to turn the volume up a little bit? And do we have a full picture? All right, perfect, fantastic. Well, I'm actually pretty excited here today about this message, even though I'm just doing a short message here tonight. It's on a very interesting subject, and I think we're all going to find it profitable. So I'm just going to go right into it with a couple prayer requests before we start. One is this coming weekend, I'll be at Zion Lutheran Church in Maddock, North Dakota. It'll be at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a wonderful opportunity. It's amazing to see that there are in some of the more evangelical Lutheran churches Christians that love Bible prophecy, that love the Word of God, that love Israel. I'm excited about this. And then in a few weeks, on the weekend of February 17th and 18th, we're going to be at another Lutheran church, Bethel Lutheran Church, in Frontier, Saskatchewan. It's a small town in the southwest corner of Saskatchewan. It's going to be a wonderful time there too. I'm really looking forward to fellowshipping with the believers. Now, one thing I do want to ask you to pray for me about is that I've got a flurry of conferences and engagements coming up starting in the end of February and just going full blast, almost non-stop all the way into May. So just pray for me that God will give me wisdom how to get everything fit together. Pray that I can come up with some creative ways to stay productive while I'm on the road, stay productive with studying, with writing, and with doing live streams and videos. So anyway, that's all I need to bring out for the introductory material. Let's go right into the subject of Bigfoot. Now, there are two common mistakes on this subject. The first is just simply unbelief. A lot of people look at the whole Bigfoot thing like, oh, it's just monster stories, it's just a bunch of fairy tales, it's just mythology. And folks, this simply is not the truth. Now, another extreme mistake that we often see, and it's becoming more popular, is some people are looking at the Bigfoot phenomena like it's entirely a supernatural phenomena. They don't believe that there's actually animals that are Bigfoot, or if they are Bigfoot, they're not actually animals, they're Nephilim, or they're something of that nature. So they're looking at it like a supernatural phenomenon related to the UFOs, to the ghosts, to the Nephilim. Now, my view of this is actually twofold. So I got two layers. Now, the first layer is that we're actually dealing with real animals. We're dealing with a cryptid from the ape family. Now, cryptids, as maybe many of you already know, they're animals that we have evidence that they exist, but there's no specimen in hand. There's not a dead specimen, not a living specimen. Sometimes they're animals that seem really supernatural or bizarre. Sometimes they're animals that are supposedly extinct. You know, for instance, in parts of the world, there's reports of what appear to be duck-billed dinosaurs still in the deep, dark corners of the uninhabited or nearly uninhabited jungles. I've read stories both from South America and the Amazon and from the jungle in Central Africa about creatures that look like small brontosauruses. So whether they're baby brontosauruses or whether there's some similar dinosaur in that brontosaurus family, it's hard to say. But these creatures have been seen, not just by natives, but by researchers, explorers, petroleum explorers, geologists. And there's also been some reports in different parts of the world, including places like, I believe it was Papua New Guinea and Sumatra, places like that, of what appear to be pterodactyls or something from that family. So big flying, massive flying reptiles. Now, when it comes back to the cryptid family that's within the apes, I suspect that what we're dealing with here with the Bigfoot is actually an ape that's supposedly extinct, or that's related to something that's supposedly extinct. Maybe it's the Gigantopithecus, which is an ape that's significantly bigger than the largest gorillas and apes that we have alive today. Some of the skeletons are nearly twice as big. So this is, and a lot of them are 30-40% bigger. This is a massive, massive ape. But it could be the Gigantopithecus. It could be something similar. So it's an unknown. It's a cryptid. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's tons of evidence that's available out there that we're dealing with a real member of the ape family. There's hair samples that have been found in the Pacific Northwest, in the Rocky Mountain states, in Canada, up in the North Woods in the northeastern part of Canada, that have been found in different parts of the southern states in the more wilderness areas. So that they found hair samples. And the hair samples always turn out to be an unknown species of primate. Well, except for the times when the hair samples are actually just mountain goat hair, or it's bear hair or something of that nature. But many of the samples are actually real primates, and they don't match any known primates in the world. Same thing with the tracks. There's thousands of plaster casts of tracks that have been taken of Bigfoot in North America. And some of these tracks, you look at them and think, well, maybe that could be a fake rubber foot. Maybe that could be a piece of plywood with some rubber paint or something on the bottom. But most of the tracks would not fit that explanation. What's interesting about the tracks, I find this extremely fascinating, is that many of them have distinct toe prints. Just like we human beings have distinct fingerprints, many of these tracks have distinct toe prints. If the mud was just the right consistency, not too firm, not too watery, then when you step into it, you're going to get a match of your toe print, whether you're a human or whether you're an ape. And so they have these toe prints, and they have unique toe prints, and they have unique movement and motion of the toes, which indicate this isn't somebody wearing rubber ape feet. And what's also interesting about this is that some of the researchers, like Jeffrey Meldum at Idaho State University, have plaster casts of apes at the same ape, but these plaster casts were taken nearly 100 miles apart. So these creatures have broad ranges that they live in. Now, they've also found many samples of Bigfoot feces, which when you do the DNA testing, it's obviously, or the testing on it, it's obviously an unknown species of primate. And when they record their howls, many of these howls are apparently from unknown primates. So when we start looking at this evidence, we realize that we're really dealing with a real animal. Now, if you're interested in the scientific approach, and I think it makes a great foundation for the study of the subject, you can start with Googling Jeffrey Meldrum. His last name is Meldrum, at the Idaho State University. He's got a lot of material available on websites, on his own material, and material where he's collaborated with other people. He's really one of the leading edge members, or the cutting edge members, of the scientific research into the view of Sasquatch as a cryptid from the ape family. In fact, he in his laboratory has over 300 plaster casts of Sasquatch footprints that he's taken in many locations in Idaho and Oregon and Washington and places of that nature. Now, there's also a lot of historical evidence too. When I was a kid, I used to read Teddy Roosevelt quite a bit. He's got 2 books out. One of them is called Hunting Trips of a Ranchman, and the other one is The Wilderness Hunter. And I think it was in The Wilderness Hunter where he talked about a hunting trip in British Columbia where he lost his companion to a Sasquatch. His companion was attacked and murdered by a Sasquatch. So, and this event was around the turn of, we're going from the turn of the century, from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. Now, I told you that I have 2 levels, and I just shared with you my first level, which is that we're dealing with a literal animal, a literal ape that's an unknown primate. But the second level, which we layer on top of this, is the supernatural layer. And the reason I go here is it's my observation that over and over again in the history of mankind, that the supernatural realm, the fallen realm, the demonic realm, capitalizes on man's fears, theories, his superstitions, his mythologies, and he uses them, he exploits them, or they use them and they exploit them. So right now, and it's been growing over the last couple decades, and it's exploding in this recent decade, that associated with this whole Bigfoot phenomenon, in the Bigfoot areas, we have a whole bunch of mysterious disappearances. And those disappearances have exploded compared to what they were in the past, in the very same areas where we're not seeing any more Bigfoot manifestations than we used to see, but the other manifestations, the mysterious ones, are exploding. So we have the mysterious disappearances. We have apparitions that appear and disappear. We have people that have followed Bigfoot tracks into the woods, and all of a sudden they absolutely vanish. There's no sign left. Or people have watched a Bigfoot walking, and all of a sudden they just absolutely vanish. Not like they hid behind a tree, they just vanish. So now we've got this supernatural realm mingling into the situation. And there's also other bizarre phenomena. I'm not going to really go deep into it tonight, because my purpose tonight isn't to go deep into the supernatural aspect or go deep into the actual physiological, the actual animal aspect of it, but just introduce you to the 2 aspects and show you that I think that we can and ought to hold both aspects, and to see that the second aspect of the supernatural is actually piggybacking on the actual animal reality. So, the demon realm, or the demonic realm, which some believe, and they may be right, or the wandering spirits of the dead Nephilim, are known to possess animals as well as humans. So I want you to keep that in your mind. If you recall in the scriptures, the Lord Jesus cast the devils out of people in the graveyard, the demoniacs, and they were cast into a herd of hogs, which anyone of Jewish descent or trying to be a Jewish proselyte shouldn't have been dealing with. And then those hogs ran off a cliff and died. So we know from that and from other data that's available that the fallen spirits here, these demons, are not merely limited to inhabiting or pestering humans. They inhabit and indwell and pester the animal realm too. And I think that once we start to understand that the Bigfoot realm is being manipulated and capitalized on by the supernatural realm, and that these demon spirits are now working with the Nephilim and are not working with the Nephilim, but working with the Bigfoot, and then working around the Bigfoot and enhancing this realm with the supernatural. I think that's what's going on. And once you understand that, then some things make a whole lot more sense, because now we're having supernatural phenomena that needs to be examined, as well as the historical, classical Bigfoot sign data that needs to be examined. Now, I mentioned earlier that the demonic realm takes advantage of mankind's fears and his mythologies and his superstitions, and he exploits them. He rides them for all that they're worth. He'll ride them until he rides them to death. And prior to the 1940s, almost all of the supernatural phenomenon that was witnessed in the Western world, aside from the classic ghost phenomena and the possession phenomena, was things like little people and trolls, witches, things of that nature. Now, since that time, most of the supernatural phenomenon that's seen apart from the ghosts, classic ghost phenomena and classic possession phenomena, is the gray aliens, or we oftentimes just call them the grays, and also the ascended masters, where a lot of the more powerful people in the world have gotten in connection with the fallen realm, and they pray and they meditate, and their ascended masters come to them and give them wisdom and help from the other side. So it's these the UFO stuff and the ascended masters, which is the most common phenomena now. And the reason for this, again, is just the fallen realm is exploiting our fears and beliefs and superstitions. So when we're looking at this stuff, we don't want to overemphasize the supernatural aspect of what's going on, and we don't want to exclude the supernatural aspect of what's going on in dealing with the Bigfoot. I think if we look at it like an actual animal, an actual cryptid from the ape family, whose evidence has been around for centuries, and we see it now with the rise of the modern supernaturalism in the world, we see it being exploited. I think if we go down this avenue, our research and our thinking on the subject is actually going to be much more profitable. Now, I did mention, or at least allude to, in the title that I was going to give my own experience with a Bigfoot. And I'm going to let you know right off the top, this is the first time I've mentioned this a couple times, just barely mentioned it in public. This is the first time I'm actually going to tell the whole story. And I'll tell why I'm hesitant later on. So back in the summer of 1977, when I had just finished my sophomore year in high school, my family still lived in Montana at that time, and my dad and my two brothers and my sister Mindy, we went on a backpacking trip into the Tobacco Root Mountains in Montana, and we camped at Hollowtop Lake. And I love that part of the country. It's a beautiful mountain range. It's beautiful woods. A lot of the mountains in Montana are just insanely beautiful. So from the Hollowtop Lake, the fishing was pretty mediocre. There was just a little bit of action with some stunted brook trout, so we didn't spend much time there fishing. It was just our place to camp. We hiked up to Deep Lake up above, and it was flush with 10 to 20 inch trout. I don't think I've ever seen a mountain lake have more trout in it. It was insane. Everywhere you looked, there was dozens of fish swimming around, and many of them were of good size. But we didn't stop there right away to fish. We wanted to go up to the higher lake first, which is Skytop Lake. And we fished there for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and I had one follow. I had a trout that was maybe 5 to 7 pounds, follow a spoon right up to shore, and then turn around and swim away. That was the only fish I saw. I didn't see a single rise in the lake. So we went back down to Deep Lake. that was flush with all those trout. And we started fishing, and it didn't matter what we threw in the water. Spoons, streamers, bait, we couldn't get a bite. My dad was fly fishing. He tried every fly pattern that was anywhere near what the fish were rising for, could not get a strike. It was one of the most frustrating fishing experiences we ever had. But I'm digressing here. I like the mountains, and I like camping, and I like fishing. So we hiked back down from there after it was getting close to dark, and the next day we didn't feel like hiking back up there to fish for fish that weren't biting, and we didn't feel like hanging around and fishing at Hollow Top Lake where the fish weren't biting very well anyway, and they were just stunted brookies. So my brother Al and I went for a hike, and we decided to hike west, and maybe a mile as the crow flies away was a big ridge, and you follow that ridge far enough north and you're going to actually come to Hollow Top Mountain. So we just decided we're going to go for a hike. And we got maybe 200 yards, 300 yards from the camp, and we cut some insanely massive tracks. At first I thought it was just great big bear tracks, just huge tracks. And I laid my arm down in those tracks, and those tracks stretched from my elbow to my fingertips. I had never seen anything like that before or since. Now, I said at first I thought it was a bear, but if it was a bear, it would have been an insanely massive bear. We followed these tracks for just a little while, and once we got out of like matted grass and got out of just where forest stuff like pine needles and stuff, and we got to where we were actually getting in the dirt, some pretty clear imprints, I realized two things. First of all, I realized that the tracks were bipedal. It was not quadrupedal. I noticed that the tracks were humanoid. There was no claw marks at all, and some of the strides were like 5 to 6 feet long. I was in shock, and it just took me a few seconds, and I realized, wow, I think these are Bigfoot tracks. This is Sasquatch tracks. And I got pretty excited, and we started following those tracks. But somewhere in there, when we're following these tracks through the boggy ground, it was here and there it was pretty dry, and here and there it was pretty mushy. A couple times, I just like the hair in the back of my neck would just spike, and I felt like I was being watched. It was kind of a scary feeling. And then a couple times I thought I heard some sounds in the woods in front of us, but you stop and you try and listen, see if you can hear it again. You never hear anything else. I mean, if it's a squirrel, it's going to sound like there's an elephant in the woods. If it was an elk or a deer, you hear that twig snap and you might not hear anything else. So anyway, we kept following these tracks, and the trail was mostly smashed grass and mushy mud that was disturbed, and you could see something, a walk there, but you couldn't really get a distinct track because the mud was half flowed back in. And here and there the tracks were in the forest stuff, and it was disturbed. But maybe 10% of the time, at least on that early stretch, the tracks were in dirt of the right textures, or mud of the right texture. It wasn't too firm, and it wasn't too mushy, and you'd get a good footprint that looked like just a massive human footprint, except it seemed wider than a human footprint would have been. It was bizarre. Now, we followed these tracks for quite a while through the woods, and we followed them up this steep hillside, and these 5-foot strides, when it got to be steep, those strides were still 5 feet apart. It was pretty amazing how steep this hill was, and these strides just stayed at 5-foot strides. And again, a couple times when we were following these tracks, my hair would stand on end, and I'd just get pretty creeped out, like we were being watched. Now, we followed these tracks until they stopped, maybe a few hundred yards from the top of the ridge where you got completely out of forest stuff and trees and dirt, and it was just all slide rock. And we went up to the top and we looked down the other side, and obviously this creature, this Bigfoot or Sasquatch, had got up on the rocks, and I don't know if he just went straight over the top or he bolted off in a different direction trying to lose us, like followed the slide rock really fast and then dipped back in the woods. I got no idea what he did. But they're pretty notorious for, if people are following their tracks, to lose them in a hurry. Now, when we hiked back, and we were kind of nervous, we got back to camp, and I told my dad about this situation. And my dad was pretty skeptical. I said, well, Dad, just come look at the tracks. And he was just not interested at all. And I don't know if he's just too tired, or if he just actually thought I was making it up, or if he thought I was confusing Bigfoot tracks with bear tracks. I have no idea. But I felt a little humiliated at the time. Now, I didn't really tell anyone for decades. I told a couple close friends, and they always mocked and scoffed. So I just kind of got to the point where I just clammed up on this and didn't tell anybody. A couple times I wrote out my report, and I was going to send it to one of the Bigfoot research organizations, and chickened out the last second. Because so often you tell people that you see a Bigfoot and they think you're a crackhead. You know, they wonder what you were smoking. If you saw Bigfoot tracks, they think you're a crackhead. They wonder what you're smoking. If you tell them you're in the woods and you heard something that was not any known animal, had to be a primate, they think you're on drugs. So, but the bottom line is, I saw something. That evidence is real. It was one of the weirdest, and in some ways one of the scaredest days of my life, but it is what it is. So, in conclusion, I would just like to say that there's a lot of odd things in this world that are on the cryptid side with real animals. There's a lot of weird things in this world on the supernatural side. But when you start researching these things, whether you're researching cryptids or the supernatural stuff or both, hold your ideas lightly, hold your theories lightly. Just continue reading and thinking and gathering information, because if you hold a theory too tightly, your gathering of information gets skewed, and you'll quit receiving information that you should be receiving. Just keep all the theories out there on the stew pot, on the back burner, and just keep researching, keep thinking, keep studying, keep investigating, keep weighing things. And one thing I think about this is not going to be a bit surprised if the Bigfoot phenomena, just like the UFO phenomena and the Nephilim phenomena, if this all explodes here in the future, maybe a little bit before the rapture and maybe a lot after the rapture. At any rate, someday, folks, we are going to get the whole story on Bigfoot. I'm definitely looking to take in the Bigfoot 101 class when we get to glory. So eyes wide open, brain engaged, heart on fire, and I'll see you next time. All right, if we have any questions for Q&A, moderators, go ahead and send them to me. I think, yeah, Hannah-Laura, I see you in the room, so fantastic. I'll bring my email folder over. All right, okay, and here are the questions. Have they tested those hairs against each other? Now, that I haven't really looked into, other than the fact that they were obviously unidentified primate hairs. I would assume that the hairs in any given area would be related. Now, I do know this, that the people that are the deepest into the research, and they're actually doing some scientific research, like looking at the fingerprints, looking at DNA, looking at the feces, looking at the hair, and comparing the recorded audios, they feel like probably the species that's in the Northwest and the Rocky Mountains, and then from there north into Canada is a distinct variety, and then maybe from the Eastern Canadian Shield and into the northeastern U.S., that's like a distinct variety that's a little smaller. And then from Texas over to Florida and up into Ohio and places like that, they have a similar creature that's probably never over 7 foot tall, and it's 5 to 7 foot tall. And they sometimes call it the skunk ape because it really, really stinks. So at any rate, that is so they're different species, and that's about all I know. So here's another question: could the Bigfoot be a human genetic creation? Well, if it's human genetic creation, it's been around for a long, long time, and it would have to go way, way back, because the legends and stories of the Native American tribes and of the peoples, for instance, in the Himalayas, they've had Yeti and Bigfoot tales for many, many centuries. Now, some people have opined that this is just a variety of the Nephilim hiding out in the woods, and I'm a little skeptical of that. The reason I am is when you look at the known Nephilim cultures in the past, where we have the massive megalithic structures and you have megalithic art and megalithic tools, they were fairly advanced, and we're not seeing anything like this. I mean, we find nests and bedding places that are advanced for apes, but it would be extremely primitive if it was human. Of course, the answer's not out. There's no definitive answers here. We probably won't have the definitive answers till we take Sasquatch 101 in glory, but that's where I'm leaning. And someone else says, I'd be following them and taking pictures as I went. Yeah, well, I wished I had seen him. And even more so, I wished I'd had a camera back then. I would have taken a picture if I'd seen him. Okay, so we've finished up the questions. And that's about it, folks. I thank you. This was intentionally a short video. I'm glad we actually got things to work. And I'm glad you guys showed up. I want to thank my moderators for hanging out and doing such a good job again. And we'll be back on tonight at 8 o'clock with Brandon Holthouse. So take care, folks, and we'll see you later on.